All right, being that it is 6 o'clock, I'm going to call the Coos Bay City Council and Planning Commission joint meeting work session to order. We do have several councilors and Mayor Benetti online this evening. Mayor Benetti, Councilor Stevens, and Councilor Matthews. We also have a member of the Planning Commission online, Patrick Terry. And then I will let Rex introduce himself, and we'll just let the Planning Commission members introduce themselves this evening.
Rex Miller, Planning. Let me do this. Fire this baby up. Okay, Rex Miller, Planning Commission.
Bill Davis, Planning Commission.
Jeff Merriman, Planning Commission.
Wonderful. And I have Councilor Kilmer to my left, and Councilor Cribbins will be joining us shortly. I do want to remind everyone that this is a work session, so no decisions will be made in tonight's meeting. And there will be a change. We have a big agenda tonight, 2 items, and it looks like we made an error and put public comment as the second item. I'm going to go ahead and move that, which is agenda item 2, to the first item on the agenda for public comment. And gentlemen, I know you're here, and I would imagine Dean and Mike have something to tell us. So, Mike, how about I let you go first? Okay, wonderful. Before you speak, I do have to remind everyone that the public comment period is intended for the public to share ideas and concerns, and it is not intended for an interactive discussion with council or the Planning Commission. There may be opportunities for public comments during specific agenda items that require a public hearing. Members of the public are requested to confine their remarks to questions or issues under discussion during this time. During any designated comment period, individuals shall not engage in personal attacks, shall not impugn the motives of any speaker, and shall at all times while in session conduct themselves in an appropriate manner. No person shall make personal, impertinent, slanderous, or unauthorized remarks or become boisterous while addressing the council. Mike, I know you've never done that, so with that said,
so far.
you have 3 minutes, my friend.
Okay, thank you. Mike Powder, Main Street, Empire area. And just a couple of little things I wanted to bring to people's attention, because I do try to look around me as I go around. On the city line, when you're leaving Empire, where they did all the bike lanes and all that good stuff, there's a sign there that, one of our famous signs that I hate, where it directs the people into the roadway. That roadway is 35 miles an hour, single lane with a double yellow line, and you're directing somebody's. I think that's a city sign. Then you cross the line, and just when you cross the line, there's a 40-mile-an-hour sign. Now, this is part of the Oregon bike route, and it's probably why we have no cyclists. We don't see many cyclists around. But I pulled up a picture from Google Streets from 2019. Nothing's changed in 6 years. So I don't know if people know it's a hazard or what. But anyway, I just I made a picture here. And, a lot of it's got to do with ODOT. And what I was doing a little look around, and I went down Arago, and ODOT spent about $400,000 on ADA ramps. Well, they're not ramps, they're just the ends of sidewalks where they put in a little yellow strip and stuff like that. And I took a lot of pictures on it. I couldn't see the purpose on it. And they were supposed to provide access around them, and they never did, and so on and so forth. So anyway, I just think that, this is part of our community, and people cannot ride a bike to Charleston or to the beaches, which I think is a big shame. Anyway, I got a little picture of that here. Another one is Ackerman Avenue. Ackerman Avenue leads to the lower lakes, and the lower lakes has had that bar across since January, I think, because of some damage there. The sign is still up there. It says Lower Lakes. I think the sign should be pulled, or it should be something written across it that says park is closed, because every time I go check on it to see if it's open yet, I usually see 2 or 3 people struggling to turn around to get back out of there again. So that was just one other thing. Either remove the signs or cover them, and that's pretty much all I have. A few little notes for today.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate your comments. Mike, would you please provide your document, if you could, to Nicole and the staff so they can look into those 2 items? Thank you very much. Dean.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Dean Lundy, Empire, Coos Bay. I was a fireman over 30 years in San Francisco, so that my observations aren't just from a casual observer. The first 10 years in the fire department, you're usually on a fire engine, which is medicals. And after 10 years, if you don't get on a truck, you're stupid, because the medicals run all the time. So a truck company usually does fires once a month or less, but most of our work was car wrecks. So, you know, I've seen a couple car wrecks. So, as you know, we've been working with ODOT. If you're at your gas pump, we're paying 50 cents a gallon road taxes. The letters that we've been getting back from the letters we've been sending them, return requested serious letters, have all been, gee, we don't have the money for you, and you know, we've all, and now they're saying they want to do a study of 101, okay? Well, they've known about these problems since 2012. That's 10, 15 years. And we've had 3 people actually on the ground going from Market Street across one side of 101 all the way, trying to cross Teakwood. Now, I am building a youth Sea Scout base at the old oil dock across from the new, where the old tank farm used to be. The old Union Oil terminal dock. It's 900 feet of dock, and on the inside I plan to put a small marina for kids. ODOT, they put out a thing that says every intersection is a crosswalk. That's their stuff. Teakwood, I'm going to give these to. This is our Sharrows. Teakwood there, with the letters we've sent, personal people with ODOT. Teakwood, I've watched that intersection. If Google sends a family to make a left turn out of Teakwood, where the new Planet Fitness is, to make a left turn across 4 lanes of 101, it's going to be an MCI. It's going to be a multi-casualty. It's going to be Blood Alley, Teakwood onto 101. We've notified these people personally, and if there are any survivors in the family, we will allow them, we will give them what we've told ODOT, and these people that we've notified can be personally sued. You kill our kid, we'll take your house. I hope ODOT's watching.
So, Dean, thank you for your comments. Also, I thank you for your passion on this project to work diligently with ODOT, and I would acknowledge that there's probably been some movement. So I know you've received a number of letters, and it sounds like they want to do a study. So thank you for your work, and I think there's some movement there. So absolutely. With that said, our next item on the agenda this evening is the presentation of the Coos Bay Economic Opportunities Analysis and Economic Development Strategic Plan. And I think Elena's going to introduce us. Is that right? Okay. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Alina Schnarr. I'm the Economic Revitalization Administrator for the City of Coos Bay. And tonight you're going to be hearing a presentation on our Economic Opportunities Analysis and Economic Development Strategic Plan project. I'll give you a little bit of background, keep it brief so our consultants can fill you in on all the good details. But the city hired, or received a grant, from the Ford Family Foundation last year for $50,000 to do this project. And so we've hired Echo Northwest consultants to work on this with us. And we have 2 of them here with us tonight, Brittany Vagin and Scott Goodman, and then Beth Goodman will be joining us online. An economic opportunities analysis is something that's mandated by state statute. And so this work will help inform updates to our comprehensive plan. And the Economic Development Strategic Plan is sort of the way we'll implement the work of the analysis. So this has been a really fun project. We started late summer, early fall, and we developed a project advisory committee with 12 stakeholders in town, including 2 of our city councilors, Stephanie Kilmer and Sarah Stevens, among other regional partners. And we've had 2 project PAC meetings so far. We'll have a couple more, but Echo Northwest will fill you in on all the details. Another detail that's been fun, they're here this week, and we've put together 4 focus groups to bring other members of the community in and get feedback. We've created a survey that's circulating throughout the community. Today we had a really fun, lively focus group with real estate professionals and developers and brokers, and that was great. And tomorrow morning we'll be meeting with South Coast Development Council's board and our tourism community VCB, Visitor Convention Bureau. I always get that acronym.
Oh, you got it, yep.
Okay, got it right. And then we'll be at the Mill Casino for a Wednesday business connection and connecting with our small business community. So I'm looking forward to continuing this work, and it'll help gear my work. It'll integrate with some of Council's strategic planning process as well. So we're aware of all the other things happening in the community and trying to bring them all together. So I'm looking forward to having them here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, Beth and Scott, or excuse me, Brittany, Scott, and Beth virtually, welcome.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you to the Council and Planning Commission for inviting us here tonight. We've been looking forward to this. We've been doing a lot of work. We're underway, so we have a lot to share with you, but also want to keep this interactive and get some of your reactions and feedback to what the work is so far. So we are going to pass between the 3 of us to present. So again, my name is Brittany Bajent. I'm a project director with Echo Northwest. I'm leading the Economic Development Strategic Plan portion of the project. And I'll invite Scott to introduce himself, and then Beth is with us via Zoom.
Hi all, my name is Scott Goodman. I've been working on this project for a while now, and I work primarily in economic development and housing policy. And when this project came across our plate, I was extremely excited about it and jumped on it because I'm from Coos Bay. I went to Milner Crest Elementary School and Sunset Middle School and Marshfield High School. And so being able to work on a project like this is sort of a passion project that, yes, there's data that goes into it, but then there's also something that's very deep and important to my heart as well. So I'm glad to be working on this project. Beth?
Hi, I'm Beth Goodman. Scott and I are no relationship to each other. We just share a good last name. I did not get to come down to Coos Bay. I'm back here in Eugene doing work today. So Brittany and Scott get to have all the fun. I am also a project director at Echo Northwest, and my specialization is around land use policy related to things like economic development and housing. So I've done this kind of work, buildable lands inventory, economic opportunities analysis for dozens of cities around the state.
Great. Okay, thank you, Beth. And Christine, are you able to share the slides? We do have a presentation for you. We'll stop at a few key moments and ask for any reactions and feedback. If it's a quiet group, we do have a few questions for you at the end. So whether we move through and ask them then or now, either way. All right. Oh, and I can drive this. Okay. There we go. So the as we said, or as Alina introduced, we're doing really 2 projects together. We're doing an economic opportunities analysis, and we're doing an economic development strategic plan. We'll walk through both of those today. The economic opportunities analysis, Beth will walk through. There's a lot of numbers. It's very technical, and so she is very skilled at walking us through all of that. And then that's where when she wraps up, that's where my work comes in. And it's really, what do we do with that data? What do we want to be when we grow up as a community? And how can we put some of that information into action and equip Alina and Chelsea with some actions that they can really tackle over the next few years? So this project has been going on since last summer. We're about halfway, 2/3 of the way through. As Alina mentioned, we've been doing stakeholder engagement and work with our project advisory committee. Have a couple more meetings with them. We'll be coming back to you toward the end of the process, but want to just show we've been working consistently on both of these projects simultaneously. And Alina gave a really nice overview of the Project Advisory Committee, but wanted to touch on this as well. Thank you for a few folks who have been really active in that group. So The advisory committee is something that we find to be really successful in projects like this because there's some data portions, there's some community engagement portions, there's some research and some writing, but the advisory committee just offers this common thread throughout the entire process and can offer this consistent feedback. And we have about Alina said 12, I had 14, so we've got about a dozen or so folks really representing regional agencies working in this space, which is really critical because economic development is a really big topic. It's a really big task to do. It's not something any one player, any one individual or staff person or elected official can take on themselves. It's really a team sport. And so having these folks come together and we can learn what the city can leverage off of their work and how the city can step in and fill some gaps. So that's really the purpose of bringing that group together. And we've been meeting virtually, but so far, Councilor Kilmer, I don't know if you recall, but we're trying to keep it engaging and keep it a nice space to get some feedback. So it's been a really good group. So with that, I will invite Beth to provide an overview of the buildable lands inventory, which is a critical portion of the first part of the project, the EOA. And Beth, I can advance slides for you.
Thank you. So I mentioned that the buildable lands, the economic opportunities analysis is really a land use project. So it starts by looking at buildable lands. And we won't be talking a lot about particular rules that guide all of this, but know that underneath of this is rules that guide all of this. And we are complying with those rules because this project could lead to an urban growth boundary expansion, which if any of you have been part of that, you know that those kind of projects can get legally and otherwise contentious. So in the buildable lands inventory here for the Coos Bay EOA, we start with all land that is zoned for commercial or industrial use. We've included also your medical district, your medical park, and then urban public, just to make sure we're not missing anything there. On the next slide, one of the important things as we're identifying land that is vacant and partially vacant is considering constraints. Obviously, Coos Bay has quite a lot of constraints. Your constraints include things like the FEMA floodway and 100-year floodplain, areas with slopes greater than 15%, areas that have high or very high landslide susceptibilities, your riparian corridors, and certain types of regulated wetlands. So all land, even if it's vacant in any of these constraints, even if it's vacant, it's not considered developable. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. So going to the next slide, this shows the results of the analysis, which shows that Coos Bay has very little land that is vacant, so undeveloped, and unconstrained. You can see if you look at some of the areas in the center that are zoned for commercial or industrial, you can see that they have little holes in them. The little holes represent areas that have constraints on them. So we're looking at about 33 acres of commercial land and 30 acres of industrial land and about 3 acres of medical park land that is vacant. If you can go back to the previous slide, Brittany, that would be helpful. So you've got a lot of constraints, a little bit of land that's vacant and unconstrained, and some of that's going to be difficult to develop or may not develop over time, such as some of the port-owned land over to the east, where you're seeing the little bits of blue areas. So it may well be that we've got some additional feedback that we want to consider with this inventory, but I also will suggest the city really consider carefully what land it keeps and removes from the inventory, because this is intended to be a long-range inventory. So how much land might develop is land potentially available? Is it vacant and could develop over the next 20 years? And that doesn't really consider necessarily whether the landowner wants to develop it or not. It's assumed that if it's vacant, it could be developed. So that's some of the underlying rules sitting underneath of this. And we'll marry the inventory of buildable lands back up with considerations for potential growth in a few slides. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them about the buildable lands inventory. This also does not include land where you could have redevelopment. That's something we're addressing much more on the policy discussion side, because I think there are quite a few redevelopment opportunities.
Mayor Benetti, do you have a question? I'm sorry to interrupt, Beth. I saw him come online.
Yeah, yes, Beth, so you said if there's any questions, so did you do the buildable land study, or did you take a buildable land study that we had done?
Oh, no, my colleague Barrett did the buildable land study, so I personally am not a GIS analyst.
Okay.
But I guided everything. In terms
So
of,
a little confusing on some of it. You have medical at 3 acres, but if I remember correctly, we're in the process of going through some development around the hospital that's going to be around 16 acres. So is that medical, or is that commercial, or what is that zoned?
I would ask Chelsea or Alina to answer that potentially.
So the parcel that is the subject of the Bay Area Hospital Housing Opportunity Site, that's zoned medical park, which I do believe we've included in kind of a commercial zoning category.
So we've got medical park separate out. It may well be that some of the land that is being developed has certain constraints on it that make it unsuitable for commercial or industrial use that would still be suitable for housing use.
And then how about the 70 acres that we're building the 400 unit development on? Is that already taken out of this scenario, or is
If
it?
that's housing, then that would not be considered in this, if it's zoned for residential uses.
So housing's another amount that's not in this description.
You had a housing study done, I think, a couple years ago. And so housing is completely separate from this, yes.
Okay, so are we, so I guess that's our buildable land study that we did, does that figure into any of this? Because we had two different studies, one we adopted and one we did not.
I'm going to have to defer to staff
Yeah.
on that.
Mayor, that buildable lands inventory was very specific to the housing needs analysis, which only looks at your residential zoned land. The economic opportunities analysis only looks at commercial and industrial zoned lands. So they're two different inventories.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, sir. Were there any other questions?
Not at this time, Beth. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our existing conditions work that we've done, looking at some of what the data is saying in the Coos Bay area. So we start out looking at the population change, 2000 to 2010. You see an increase in population of about 8%. When you compare that 2010 to 2023, you see a decrease of 1%. So what we're looking at is essentially a plateau of population. Anecdotally today, when we were having focus groups, talking with real estate folks and developers in the area, we want to make a note that we are hearing folks saying that, yeah, we heard it feels like there's more people moving in here. There's just to put that out there that we are hearing that as well, but this is what the data is showing from the U.S. Census and from the Portland State University, which has the official population estimates. Some of the other demographics that we're seeing is that Coos Bay has lower incomes in general than some of the state and county overall, so a couple different ways of looking at that. There are more residents that are earning under $20,000 and fewer residents that are earning over $100,000 compared to the county and the state. We are also seeing in Coos Bay the median age is older than the state, slightly younger than the county. Those numbers, Coos Bay's median age is at about 43 years old. The county is 48. The state of Oregon is 39. When we are looking at the share of race in Coos Bay, the share of Latino residents in Coos Bay is growing, while the overall BIPOC population in general is declining. And then one of the other things that we were looking at here has to do with educational attainment. And in Coos Bay, there are fewer college grads and more residents with a high school degree or less when you compare that to the county or the state. Next, this is a little bit of market research that I like to put a huge caveat on about this, that this is CoStar data. It's a proprietary source that we can do some data sourcing from about office, retail, pricing, the amount of deals that are going through. But when you're looking at a community as small as Coos Bay, it's such a small sample size that there's a huge margin of error that goes into that. So we didn't even include the industrial data here because it wasn't sufficient to even show. What we are finding for office rents is that they are near what they were pre-pandemic levels, and that vacancy rates are also near pre-pandemic levels for office. When we were having our focus group today with the real estate and development brokers, we were trying to ask them about this, and this is essentially, they were saying, yeah, that sounds about right with what we're seeing. Rents aren't really going up right now. And then, so a similar thing for retail, that rents are slightly above pre-pandemic levels, but not by a lot, and vacancy rates appear to be rising, slightly higher than pre-pandemic levels. We can compare this as well when you look at some of the new development that's happening, say in the Coos Bay Village area, that area is able to command much higher rents. It's brand new development, so you can obviously get a higher rent from that. But when you're looking at maybe what you could get in some of the downtown areas that require a lot of their older buildings, require a lot more work being done to them, you can't get the same sort of rent on those places. And because they need some improvements, and that becomes cost prohibitive to get a new tenant in the space, which has a little bit to do with what we're seeing with the vacancy rates. We also looked up here at small businesses, comparing 2012 to 2022 and saying, hey, what are we noticing for businesses with less than 30 employees? And what we're seeing is that it's staying pretty similar between 2012 and 2022. So similar number of establishments, similar number of employees, and accounting for a similar amount of total employment. One of the things that this indicates has got to do with the similar amount of what we're seeing with a plateau of population. That's what we're seeing with a plateau of small businesses that are starting up as well. And then when we start to look at the quarterly census employment and wages information here, this is the state data that we have available about what do we have for the overall employment and average pay for the biggest sectors in Coos Bay. What you see here is the biggest employment sector is government. That's also got the highest paying jobs for the 6 largest sectors that we're looking at. Next is healthcare, social assistance, and private education. This is largely represented by the hospital, which we can talk a little bit more about what's going on with the hospital, but they are generally higher average wages than Coos Bay and the county. Next is looking at retail trade, which is still a significant sector of the economy here, but slightly lower average wages. This has got a lot to do with tourism and the types of food service, retail types of jobs associated with that. We can discuss a little more what that might look like with increased tourism. The next one that we have is administrative support and waste management and remediation services. That's sort of a funny terminology of categories. Largely what that includes is temp agencies that there's a significant amount of here in Coos Bay. And so you'll see that's got lower than the average city and county wages. Next up is accommodation and food services. One of the lower paying jobs of the large 6 sectors here that we're looking at. Again, this would have implications around tourism and the types of jobs that are associated with that. And the final one that we have up here is transportation, warehousing, and utilities. That is a much higher paying sector, but doesn't have quite as much employment in Coos Bay. What we don't have shown up here, but a lot of folks are often interested in, is manufacturing, which has in general declined in the area. Is it a higher paying job, but given things like the closing of the Georgia Pacific Mill, that is just not accounting for as many jobs in the area as it once did, say 10, 20, 30, 50 years ago.
In the government column, did you include the Confederated Tribes of the Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Sayasol Indians in that number?
That's a good question. Beth, do you know the answer if that's in there, Brittany?
I would imagine it may well be in there. I think we'd need to go back and have a look at that. It may well be that, given the ownership of that, I can't tell you off the top of my head. They will be in here if employment is located in Coos Bay in the city.
Correct. Thank you.
We can get back to you on that one now.
Lucinda, this is Sarah. Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Yeah.
I see in the note that this is employment data from 2022. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So I do think it would be interesting to assess the change over the last couple of years, given the pandemic. Coming from a workforce background, I do disagree with some of this data. So I think it would be interesting to get some updated data from our economists at the employment department.
We'll have one of the following slides. We'll have a comparison of 2007 to 2022 as well. So we can look at some of those. Go ahead, Beth.
Sarah, on your point, the most recently available data to us would be 2023, and it wasn't available when we started this project. It just became available towards the end of last year. So we can look at that and see what that's saying, if it's particularly different than 2022.
Thank you.
I had a quick question on the vacancy information. How does that compare to other areas? Is that vacancy rates in here, in your report says that they appear to be rising? Is that comparable? Is that what's happening in other locations? I'm just curious if that's just a Coos Bay area thing.
Do you want to?
Yeah, I can chime in. So we hesitated putting values on this slide because it is lacking. We wanted to check roughly an order of magnitude, which is what we talked to the group about today. I can speak for larger, more urban areas have much higher vacancy rates. I can speak for the Portland metro region, and there's much higher vacancy rates. But I think the dynamic between, especially with the rents with the newer properties versus those that require some pretty significant tenant improvements, was one of our biggest takeaways today from the group, and some of the barriers facing especially the downtown core. And as we're thinking about where to prioritize resources and implementation of this work moving forward, I think that was really helpful. But we can take a look at countywide, but I would say this is low compared to some more urban areas.
Okay, and that was my next question, so you just.
Oh, okay.
I was going to tease Scott, yes, we're a small community, but we are the largest community on the Oregon coast, so I'm sure you know that, so I just wanted to point that out, so.
I got a question for Cinda. So in your discussion, Brittany or Scott, with these groups today about the downtown area and needing upgrades, did any of the discussion come up with that we have urban renewal dollars that we're partnering with businesses all the time to upgrade their businesses and their facilities? I mean, this is something that we push to get done, and we've done it in multiple ways and put in quite a bit of money in the downtown and Empire areas. So I don't understand why that would be an impetus or a problem when we're here to help.
Yeah, I can start out saying that in the conversations today we were having with developers and real estate folks, that there was a lot of appreciation of those urban renewal funds, that several of the projects that have happened, take the Tioga building, for example, would not have happened but for the additional assistance. And there was, I can pass along positive feedback as well about the willingness of City Council to be working with folks to try and get to yes whenever possible and make things happen. That was positive feedback that we heard, that when we speak with other communities about their city councils, that is not always the feedback that we're hearing. So that was positive accolades to pass along in your direction.
Okay, thanks. I just was hoping that we could get more interest, I guess, to help facilitate the development down there.
Yeah, the constructive feedback I can relay was around permitting and systems and transparency and speed and those kinds of things. And so we took a lot of notes and can put together some more kind of refined recommendations of how the city can, how staff in particular can help support some of these processes and make it really transparent. But they were, again, very affirming and just grateful for elected support and the some of the funding measures. But I think that there's a lot of work that the staff in particular are already doing that we can continue to leverage and support. So it was all very constructive.
Thank you. I would imagine we will get all of the feedback from the 4 focus groups at the end of this project. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, any questions?
Okay. All right, I think we will pass it back to Beth.
Okay, so as we go on to talk a little bit about growth forecasting, we're presenting just a little tiny bit of data. The economic opportunities analysis is just chock full of data. Understand that we're just presenting a little slice of it. So one of the important pieces of data here is looking at the changes in covered employment by industry. We looked at between 2007 and 2022, because 2007 was the peak before the Great Recession, and 2022 was, when we started this, the most recently available data to assess what was happening. We also looked at some intervening years, which I don't have a slide about right here. But what we found is that essentially Coos Bay has lost jobs since 2007, about 425 jobs. You can see some of the industries with the bigger losses are things like transportation and warehousing, manufacturing, things like information, government, that kind of thing. Where you grew a lot of jobs was in healthcare, healthcare primarily. Private education is a very small slice of that. And so as we're thinking about, going forward, one of the questions is, of course, how will Coos Bay grow? On the next slide. One of the big considerations, I feel like it's a big old elephant in the room that everybody's talking about, is the potential for port expansion. This information provides, this slide provides information from the port, from some of their recent studies. Of course, I want to caveat it and say the port is, continually understanding potential expansion plans in more detail. So they're looking at about 2,500 direct jobs. That would be jobs at the port just outside of Coos Bay. About 6,900 indirect jobs, and those would be basically in the broader Coos Bay industry, some of them maybe in Coos Bay, on up through Eugene and beyond when you're talking about transportation and that kind of thing. 2,600 temporary construction jobs that would happen over, I think, the 5-year construction period. Those jobs, the biggest challenge and opportunity from those, of course, is going to be about housing. And of course, port expansion, a big impact of it on the region will be about housing, which we want to acknowledge that. That's very important. But that's, of course, we're hanging out in the commercial and industrial area.
Beth, did you say that these numbers came from the port? Is that correct?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Oh, yes. We've talked several times to them. And Alina remembers the actual names of Matt, and I know he talked with Melissa, who used to be a Board of Commissioners for the county, and Cribbins is her last name. I apologize.
No, that's okay, thank you.
And then, our estimate, which is a very, very rough estimate based off of that, please go back, is for about 600 to 1,200 what you call induced jobs. So those would be jobs in Coos Bay or North Bend or in the unincorporated area around the communities, in things like restaurants, childcare, retail, medical workers, all of those kind of jobs that are related to when you have growth in the area, you also have growth of these kind of jobs. So we're thinking about that. If you go on to the next slide, please. So in forecasting employment, there's a lot of detail here, and I'll try to keep it fairly high level. We start with an estimate of covered employment for the city of Coos Bay. We know that covered employment only includes people who are covered by unemployment insurance. So that doesn't include people who are in the gig economy, who are sole proprietors, etc. And so we use an estimate of covered to total employment for the county, the ratio there, that shows that somewhere around 65 to 75% of employment in the county is covered by unemployment insurance. We've got that exact number. I just don't have it in my head this moment. And so we basically inflate your covered employment up to an estimate of total employment for the city of Coos Bay. You just can't get that data at the city level. So in 2025, we're estimating that you've got around, something more than 13,500 employees in the city. We're presenting here two different forecasts for growth. These are both based on what are called safe harbors. A safe harbor is an approach to doing a forecast that if you do it correctly and it's challenged in court, the city would win the challenge. This is important because this could be leading to an urban growth boundary expansion. It's not the only way to do an employment forecast, but it's one set of ways. One of the forecasts is assuming that employment grows at the same rate as population in the city, which is about 0.11% per year. That would result in 291 new jobs between 2025 and 2045. That would be a lot more growth than you've seen historically since 2007, but that's still pretty small growth. The other forecast is assuming that Coos Bay grows at the rate that the region for the South Coast is forecast to grow, which is 0.55% per year. That would result in about 1,600 new jobs. And, at first blush, if there wasn't a port expansion, I would say, wow, what's going to generate those new jobs? If there is a port expansion, that's certainly an economic generator in the region. And then all of the other things that will be in the economic development strategy would also support that kind of growth. That's a more robust growth rate. So the 0.55% or the 1,600 new jobs growth forecast is the one that we've been talking about more and working with more with our advisory committee, and would like your feedback on, if you have feedback on it. It seems reasonable to us based on potential for expansion at the port.
Mayor Benetti?
Well, I don't know if, I agree if that's what the port numbers come up with, but I'm having trouble, Beth and Scott and Brittany, with your employment numbers. And so I'm on the SOWIB board, and Sarah's our executive director. These numbers aren't matching what we get, and we meet every quarter. And so I guess what I'm saying is, or suggesting, is maybe you should get together with our economists that we use, and we get data every quarter of where things are. And it's much more up to date than 2022. We're getting data that's maybe, a couple months old. And so, and these also are regulated to the state. So something's missing in these numbers, I think, that would be important for our future, our understanding, I think.
Joe,
Sarah?
could you remind us what SOWIB stands for?
It's our workforce board for our region, so.
Thank
So
you.
I think Guy Towery is probably the economist you're talking about. Am I right about that?
Guy Tower? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sarah?
I got his
Yes,
name.
we work with both Guy and Jeff.
Okay. And we'll talk to Guy again. We'd gotten some information from him some months ago, and I haven't looked at it in a little while, so I don't want to comment on that. We'll make sure that the numbers we're using as baseline are reasonable numbers to begin with.
And a factor I think that you mentioned, and I know it's not, that you're not discussing housing, but without appropriate housing, we can't fill the jobs. And, it's like the chicken and the egg thing here. And so without housing for employees, it's a constant problem. And I know that I hear people all the time are looking for employees, can't find employees, and it's all over. And so anyway, I know the factor.
I will certainly agree with you 100% about the fact that housing, especially in a place like Coos Bay, is an economic development issue.
And so on, with your data that you have, at least this far, do you agree that we need to expand our UGB?
For housing, I won't say anything about that because I haven't done any of that work. But how about I go on to the next slide?
Okay.
All right, so we run through all the numbers. And what we come up with is the potential for expanding your UGB for commercial and industrial uses, about 39 acres for industrial and about 24 acres for commercial. So that number could change if we, end up with different employment numbers. So let me just say that that number might change some. I would say, yes, you probably could justify a UGB expansion. I don't know what you can justify for housing. I just haven't done that work. That's something that I suspect Chelsea has from your last study.
I agree. I mean, I think it justifies it, and the industrial part would just reiterate it's really needed, and unfortunately, we're in a very awkward situation. To get it developed, it's going to take 6 years, and I think that's really unfortunate.
Yeah. So if we go to the next slide. So one of the things we are looking at a deficit for employment land. If you're doing a different UGB expansion, especially for housing, I would look at the commercial land deficit and think about where would it make sense to have commercial with new housing. In other words, are you looking at larger areas of new housing growth? And if so, would a modest amount of commercial land be appropriate in those areas? I would also look at opportunities to support redevelopment, which I know, based on your urban renewal area and talking to Alina, you guys are looking at already. So are there some commercial areas that are a little more ripe for redevelopment, where you may want to focus some of that redevelopment? Industrial's a different issue, and I don't have a good sense of the land around Coos Bay and whether you have good places to expand for industrial that would benefit from port expansion or other industrial activity going on. I just don't have a good enough sense outside of the city. So those things are, I think, very important to consider.
Well, I think you got Jeff Marino that sits on the planning commission that could probably give you that information.
Mm-hmm.
And he's here tonight.
And these are all things that I think we'd want to consider in the economic development strategy partially. So that is, with the numbers that we have currently, that is where we land on potential UGB. We'll look at our numbers of employment more closely.
And then will you just update this report, Beth? Is that how that'll work after you meet with Guy and Sarah?
Yeah. If we have an update there to that. We haven't yet written this part of the report because we wanted to hear from y'all before we wrote it.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would love to offer to sit in on those meetings with you and crosswalk this. We have some really up-to-date data at COEB, so I will make sure you have my email address, and I would love to work alongside you on this.
Happy to do so. And so I think now I hand it back over to Brittany.
Great, thank you, Beth. All right, we are going to shift gears and talk about the Economic Development Strategic Plan, and this is the kind of so what? What do we do with this data? Data is only as good as we can put it into action, and so that's the benefit of doing these projects together. So I'll walk through this fairly quickly to save a few minutes toward the end. I think we're up at about 7. Is that, we have about 10, 15 minutes?
That's okay, yeah, keep going.
Okay, so what is an economic development strategic plan? In case that you don't work in this space, just wanted to share what the different elements of this work will be. It will ultimately be a document. It will ultimately be a roadmap for Chelsea and Alina and folks at the city and regional partners to really understand what is the role of the city in economic development. So we starting with existing conditions, which we've been running through this evening, and what are some of the current trends and demographic conditions. And then we moved on to a long-term economic vision. And so we started to draft this with our advisory committee and have some feedback on that. So we'll share that next. And then we will be moving into what goals. So what direction do we want to go? How will we measure success and metrics? And then finally, what are some actions? And actions for this project will be things like finite pilot projects or programs to explore or specific policies. And rather than just dump you all with a list of dozens of programs or best practices to consider, this will be a really targeted list of prioritized things for staff and council and partners to implement on over the next 5 years. So the vision statement is something that we think about over the next 20 years, whereas this strategic plan will look really over the next 5 years. And so again, we started with a version, we got feedback from our advisory committee, and now this is our revised vision statement, and would love to hear some reactions to this. So in 20 years, Coos Bay will be a thriving place where people of all ages want to live, work, invest, and visit. Coos Bay will support a variety of well-paying jobs that leverage its geographic assets, community collaboration, and local culture.
The first comment I have is that we, as a council, are going through a strategic plan. First I want to say I appreciate the work you've done. So let me preface that.
Yeah.
I am concerned that we are working on our strategic plan, and how do these two documents, how do they align?
Yeah.
Because I think it's very easy to have two separate documents, and one thing says, this, and our strategic plan might say something different. And this council is very committed to making sure that if we're going to do this work, we're going to do it right.
Yeah.
And so my question is, did you work with our team on what our mission and vision and strategic plan looks like? I know we're still walking through that process, but how did this statement come about?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So we worked with our advisory committee. Where are we in? April, it was in February or March, and it was it was the week after you all had your, I think, weekend retreat doing the visioning exercise. And so some of the counselors were fresh off of that exercise. Your work is far more robust and comprehensive. Ours is much more defined and specific to economic development. So we were doing this just off the tail end of yours, and so have been working with staff to ensure that we have visibility at least into the work that you're doing. I know it's not final, and so we don't, and it's not public yet. So we're trying to be sensitive to that and keep this project moving, but ensure that these absolutely are aligned and coordinated. But this will be specific to economic development. And I know from your last strategic plan that economic development was raised as a priority and will continue to be a priority. And so my hope is that through this work, we can do some of the homework for you already. And so as you move into implementation, there will be some projects that can get started and can speak to that larger vision. But it's a little bit of a song and dance of working with what the draft materials are versus what our work is, but staying closely connected with staff on that.
Great. So once that document does become public, I imagine there'll be lots of alignment between the two documents. Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
But if there's more we can do, we would love to, because we want to set you all up for success. The last thing we want to do is, to ask you to publish these two things that don't feel aligned. So if there's more that we can be doing, we do want to make sure.
Great.
We're
Thank you,
doing that.
Councilor Kilmer.
And I was just going to reiterate that Counselor Stevens was very much involved with making sure that conversation happened in that planning session.
Thank you, Councilor Stevens. Mayor Benetti, any comments from you?
No, not at the moment. I guess this is it's still a work in progress, if I understand correctly. There's some data that needs to be corrected. I mean, I think corrected maybe after she meets with Sarah, and then this council giving some input, and then it'll come back to us. Is that how this works?
Yep, sounds like it. Okay, great. Thank you.
The Planning Commission is pretty quiet. I'd like to hear something from our esteemed Planning Commission members.
Rex, I'm going to put you on the spot. Any comments?
This is the first we've seen of this, so we're just listening mostly.
Don't forget to unmute.
I was just saying, this is the first we've seen of this in this way. So we're mostly listening, I think. I am, anyway.
Jeff, did you have a comment?
I did spend some time looking at these maps that were prepared. Spent some, recreated some of the maps, and some of the acreages, I think, will change going forward. But in general, the city is very constrained with regard to the industrial and commercial lands. And I think the MP lands, those three acres, is seriously understated. So I will spend some additional time with the mapping group to see if we can straighten out some of that acreage.
Thank you, Jeff. Rex, any comments?
Well, I guess it would be, just come from my point of view, which probably is not very, very intellectual, but we sell a lot of bark mulch. And a large percentage of our people that buy bark mulch come from Paradise. So you get to ask them, well, why are you here? Well, we got burned out. This is a good place to go. Well, now, it's just a personal opinion, but Paradise is just a very small drop in the bucket compared to LA. When you see these people that have been burned out down there, now they've got high taxes, they can't buy fire insurance anymore. I think they're headed this way. And I think there's going to be a large surge of people moving into the Coos Bay area, Coos Bay North Bend, because we're really kind of a diamond in the rough here that nobody's figured out. They've figured out Bandon, they figured out Florence, but Coos Bay is just kind of right in the middle. So I think there's something coming this way, and one of the thoughts that I had is that maybe, so we don't have any more land we can develop. Maybe we look a little bit harder at ADUs in people's backyards. You know, that may or may not be a good idea, but and also the commercial area. I think we need to, and I know you've spent some money and some time on the downtown area, but I think we need to kind of reinvent that if we can. Years ago, many years ago, when Pony Village went in, everybody wanted to move into Pony Village because it was new and exciting, and so a lot of people moved there. Now it's kind of on, you know, it's so-so, but people like new and exciting, and that's okay. But I think also there's a really good opportunity here to reinvent the downtown. I was involved years ago, gosh, it's back in the 70s, in an area downtown Portland, the Burnside area. Terrible place. It was nobody wanted to go there. People got mugged and whatnot. And the architectural firm I worked for at the time bought a building down there and reconverted it. Everybody said this is a crazy idea, but it actually turned out very nice. And it's still there today, and it kind of reinvented that area. So I don't know how that fits into economic development, but instead of building a lot of new homes, maybe we ought to look at kind of reconverting some of the things that we've got now, and possibly ADUs in people's backyards if they're done right. So anyway, that's the only thing I had.
Well, Rex, I appreciate your point of view. I think we who live in Coos Bay have figured it out. As my late husband would say, we live in one of the last great places with clean water and clean air, and so we do get it, and I do agree with you that more people are coming, which is exciting. And so having infrastructure in place, having housing in place are all incredibly important. I see Councillor Matthews online. Carmen, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I'll chime in. First off, I just want to say thank you to the team at Eco Northwest for hello, good to see you, for providing the information. I am hearing the comments that maybe some of the data is not as up to date as some of the data we are seeing in other avenues. However, personally, I'm feeling this strikes home pretty heavily. There's not a lot of growth. We need people to come in and start new businesses, to reinvigorate the spaces that are available currently. There is vacancy, there's need for improvement in our downtown and in our commercial spaces. I think this is a call to action to our community. Like this, we need to do it ourselves. And if there's one like comment that is not in criticism, but just something that I notice, is that it relies heavily on port influence. And I am so tired of that, because if they were there here at this meeting, maybe we could get somewhere with some kind of economic plan together, but we don't do that. So I think I would like to focus on what the city of Coos Bay can do economically for a strategy without the port. That being said, I would love to work with the port to make that whatever happens. Also, on another note, I know the port is going to do what they are going to do, not always being maybe in congruence with what the community wants, or maybe what the council wants, or maybe it is. I don't know. That being said, I think that there are opportunities for the port to be a major player in our future, and I would love to see an economic plan that is crafted with them at the table with us. So I guess maybe just sharing a bit of my frustrations with the fact that the port seems to work on a much larger scale without always thinking about what is happening here in this community and what they're here to do for us. So maybe that's just my soapbox moment, but I have some frustrations with that relationship. So that being said, I got that off my chest. I appreciate the information. I think their community has a lot of work to do to make it what we want it to be, and I think we have a lot of opportunity, and this report shows that.
Thank you, Councillor Matthews. Appreciate your comments. So you've got lots of feedback on this vision, so I know we have a few more slides to go through, so I'll let you get to that, Brittany.
We do. We have 2 more slides with content, if that's okay, and then some next steps just to orient us. All right, so another overview I wanted to share with all of you was another activity we did with our advisory committee called a SWOT exercise. It's a strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats exercise. It helps really organize feedback, organize data, organize input into these buckets. And so you're seeing those buckets on the slide. So I'll go through these briefly. I'm curious if any are resonating with you, if anything feels missing. So we'll pause here for discussion as well. The top row are internal attributes effectively to the city. So what's happening within the city. So strengths include things like natural beauty and tourism. You're located on the coast. You have ample outdoor recreational opportunities. There's lots of support for tourism. There's a lot of strong regional partnerships and collaboration in this region, which we've heard quite a bit about. Infrastructure and resources. We just heard about clean water and clean air. That should not be overlooked and taken lightly. There's also a lot of community engagement, and we're hearing more about younger folks getting more involved. We actually have a survey that's out right now in both English and Spanish, and we'll be tracking demographics of that, and we'll be happy to report back on who's interested in taking that survey. Weaknesses are, there's certainly infrastructure limitations, including when we talk about infrastructure, we're speaking to broadband, transportation, as well as funding for development. And that's, when we talk about infrastructure, we're talking about it as it relates to economic development. So for businesses to be able to do their work effectively. Also some workforce and education issues. We talked about the lack of skilled labor. There's at least perceived low interest in blue collar jobs, which we'd like to unpack a little bit more. Social and economic challenges, things such as homelessness and healthcare. And some local perception issues. We talked with the developers and brokers today right off the bat about branding and messaging about our community and how can we be our own advocates. And some of the naysayers and the really vocal minority are getting that air out in the world, and it's time to take that message back. So that was a really interesting discussion today. And we're hearing there's resistance to change, resistance to growth. This is not a Coos Bay issue. This is an Oregon issue. This is something we're seeing in a lot of communities, that we're very growth ambivalent as a state. Some external elements, we talked about both opportunities and threats. So economic expansion is certainly an opportunity with port-related jobs, with boutique hotels and festivals. There's just lots of opportunity there. Could be some opportunity down the road for renewable energy. And of course, the waterfront development. Scott and I just went for a walk right before this meeting and could just see it, just see the waterfront really activated. The fact that you're on this this beautiful water is really remarkable. So how can we, through this strategy, think about that? And threats, so things outside of the community, but are really important context for what is happening here locally, things like environmental and climate risks, so certainly rising flooding events, invasive species, there's just things for that contextualization. There's political and policy changes at the state and federal level, so we started to inch into some state tax policies and business friendliness, or perhaps lack thereof, across the state, which you as a community may not have direct influence over, but it's important to work around and work with. And then this piece about perhaps resistance to change. So just interest in maintaining the status quo, especially along longer term residents, hearing that from some of the stakeholders. So I'll pause there and ask for, just reactions.
So I think you've heard from a few of the counselors. Well, I'll just state the obvious, as Beth said, the elephant in the room. You have a council who has, I think, differing opinions on what growth looks like in this community. I see that we have resistance to change as a weakness. You mentioned a small minority in this community, and I don't think we've actually done the research to what that looks like in terms of, I think we all want development. What that looks like, I think, is the disagreement. And so I just want us to be careful when we say resistant to change. We historically have been a resource extraction-based economy, right? That's changed. And so what we've experienced now looks remarkably different in the last 25 years. I think Councillor Matthews, his concern, what we have seen historically with the port, I'm very excited that we have new leadership and there seems to be much better engagement. I think that we have been down this road before as a community of the white knight that's going to save this community, and perhaps this project will come to fruition. And if it does, my great hope would be that somehow all the environmental issues that make this place what it is today can be addressed. So I just want us to be really careful when we're talking about resistant to change, what that looks like. And there are different opinions right here at this dais, and they might be viewed differently, and so I'm not trying to get into a political where I stand. I just want us to be really, really careful on how we approach that work.
I think that the discussion when we were doing the SWOT analysis was not focused on one particular big thing. It was an overarching, I mean, it's been a while since we talked about this, but it almost falls into the community. You know, there's, I think, maybe even some discussion on retirees that are coming into the area. So it was much more broader than just focused on a white knight project.
Great, thank you. Any other comments from councilors? No?
Yeah, I will just say that I echo your comments, Councilor Lucinda DeNovo, and I said that multiple times. I think we need to say if, not when, and we don't need to just rely on one white knight to quote save the community. I think there's a lot of opportunities that we need to explore, and we really need to approach this. I appreciate approaching this from a data-driven point of view, but we want to make sure that data is really up to date given the pandemic in 2020 to 2022 and the changes that have occurred since then. I do have some concerns with with where we're headed with this specific project, and I think there's some more work to be done.
And I want to be clear, this is not an attack of the port. I made the statement of white knight in 2010. It is 2025 today, right? So it's what does that growth look like? And so I want to make sure that the port doesn't feel attacked in this. It's just one example we used. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, and I just want to say I appreciate the report you've given us and the information. And I do agree with, the tourism is something that this council and city's been working on. And because of it, I think we've been very successful because of it. I also think there's some problems with our workforce. We don't have enough to fill what we need. Our infrastructure limitations are very frustrating. It's difficult for us to put in the correct infrastructure, even though we probably put in, Nicole, 60 or 70 million since 2016. Which I think is a pretty big lift for our city. But, we try to get help, and maybe you can point us in the right direction from state money that, like, for instance, we need a pump station for those 400 units that we're developing. And so that type of infrastructure is frustrating for me. I agree with Carmen that we need to take the reins and do something ourselves, which I think we've done, but there's more that we need to try to do. And that's why I asked you, these businesses you talked about, these urban renewal dollars that we are trying to, and I throw at people to do something with them, with these buildings and fix them up. And we just can't seem to get there with out-of-state owners and some interest from other developers. Some things we've been very successful. Coos Bay Village, we got the 400 houses going. We're looking at Empire and doing some things there. Front Street's been prosperous and moving in the right direction. So anyway, I'll get off my high horse here. So.
Thank you. Brittany,
Sorry,
back to you.
can I say one more thing?
Mm-hmm.
I was just recently at the Southern, I'm not going to remember the name, the housing summit that happened a couple weeks ago, and I had the opportunity to sit with Rob Crocker, and we had a dynamic discussion about some of the challenges he's faced with working not only with the city, but with his insurance company to rehab the space that we all know so well that has caused some blight in our downtown region. And so I do think there's an opportunity to do a deeper dive, maybe some focus groups, and understand some of the specific challenges that some of our developers are facing. And then again, to explore that opportunity to, like we've seen in Portland and other areas, to institute some sort of higher tax or blight tax to incentivize people to make some movement on some of these blighted properties.
Sorry, thank you, Councilor Stevens. Back to you, Brittany.
Okay. All right, I have one more slide for you, and then we'll talk about next steps. So I wanted to draft some goals because this is all feeling kind of nebulous and fuzzy, and so I thought this might help kind of bring the conversation back into one space. And so this is me. This is coming from me. Our advisory committee hasn't seen this yet. We'll start to discuss this and share this when we meet with them next month, but I'd be remiss if I didn't share this since we had the opportunity to talk with you all this evening. So I did want to just put this in front of you. This is a very rough, just putting pen to paper on some themes that we're seeing. I think 3 to 5 goals in a project like this feels right, feels appropriate. So this is roughly, as many goals as we would want to put in front of you, and thinking forward, perhaps a few actions, so a few projects or initiatives nested within each of these goals that would be implemented over a 5-year period, depending on resourcing and funding and so forth. So with that, I thought I would share these, and then we can wrap up together, answer any additional questions you may have. So as a first pass, I thought goals could be over the next 5 years to strengthen and diversify the local economy. Second would be to align land use and infrastructure with economic priorities. The third would be to develop a skilled and inclusive workforce. The fourth is to make Coos Bay a destination to live, work, invest in, and visit. And finally, to foster strategic partnerships and regional collaboration, because again, city staff can't possibly do all of this. And so where do they need to lean in and lean out and really define those roles a bit more? So with that, I'll ask for any feedback you may have, and I would love to see how we can nest and align this with what council is doing as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I was just going to say that I really like these goals, and having sat in on the PAC meeting, and then the involvement in some other economic development organizations and agencies that I'm involved with, I'm seeing some of these common themes that are in these goals, which is helpful overall, because a lot of times, I mean, I have lived in this community all of my life, and I have seen these things working. It's like everybody's doing something along these lines, but they're doing their own thing. And this is the first time in a long time I've seen strategies that are starting to align. You've been here, you know what I'm talking about. So I appreciate this work.
Well, that's,
and
sorry.
the strengthening and diversify the local economy, I think fits right in with what you're talking about, so.
I'm glad it feels familiar and aligned. I don't want it to feel too familiar because I want Coos Bay to jump off the page with this work. And I don't want this to sound so familiar that it feels too generic and it could be any community or any coastal community. So we'll continue to refine that. And again, I think those actions will provide a lot more contextualization for what this actually means and what will actually get done. But the feedback is helpful. So thank you.
Okay. Anything
Any
else?
other comments? All right. All right. Well, thank you for your feedback. Thank you for joining us. We do have a survey. As I mentioned, it's in English and Spanish. You can navigate to it if you navigate to this QR code, but we'll make sure that you receive a link. We have the survey out for another couple of weeks. It's really a space to leave our focus groups. So if there, if more things come to mind, it's a pretty simple, straightforward survey asking about challenges and opportunities and where the city can play a role. And we looked, and there's 40 or 50 or so responses so far. So we'll provide a full report of what that looks like once we close it in a couple of weeks. And staff has been really wonderful in getting the word out about that. And we, like we said, have focus groups this week, and then we'll have a couple more meetings with our advisory committee next month. We'll talk through these goals and then bring back some actions and real metrics for them to respond to. And then we will be coming back to you with a more final project.
I think, Mayor Benetti, you mentioned it to me, but we didn't mention it in the SWOT analysis, that one of the challenges that we have in this community is public safety. The jail specifically. And so if we're going to accomplish all of these great things that are in this plan, I think that is something that needs to be addressed. So currently I think it's a threat and a weakness, and until we get that addressed, we're not going to be able to accomplish. I want Coos Bay to be a safe place to live too. I think you had that in your vision, and so I think that needs to be included. Mayor Benetti, did I say that correctly?
Yeah, it's one of those things that we talked about, and I don't know if it comes as a threat, community resistance to change, and the change needs that they need to address how we are dealing with the crime here, and what that means is lack of jail space, unfortunately. And so, and I think that will impact us in some fashion. In fact, Joel Sweet, one of our realtors here, had contacted me because he's had somebody that was outside the area that looked at one of our I don't know where he got the information that crime was horrible here, and I had them reach out to our chief of police, and he gave some correct information. But those type of things can affect development. So.
Thank you. Councilor Cribbins, you've been awfully quiet, so I'm going to give you the opportunity to be the last word. So it's all yours.
I just have my listening ears on, so I'm taking it all in. I want to thank you guys for the work you've done. There's a lot of good effort there. I appreciate that.
Okay, great.
Well, you get the last word.
Well, go ahead,
I'm going to
please.
try to be the last. Two things. A question. How does that 50 fit into normal surveys that you do? Are we down? Or can
No,
we?
I think that's great. I think those are great numbers. It's not going to be statistically significant. That would be a much larger, more expensive effort. And frankly, responses are only going to scale. And so my hunch is with these type of surveys, they tend to skew, respondents tend to skew older and whiter and more female. So we'll see if that is the same in the community, but only being out for a week, maybe getting 50 responses. I think that's wonderful.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. And then the second point, it's not really a question, when you were talking about the SWOT analysis, and then the mayor talked about getting a phone call from a realtor, and that concern about where that information on crime in our community. We know, we you know, to deny and say that we don't have a problem is, I mean, it's everywhere. But I think that was part of that SWOT analysis when we were talking about the social component. Because I actually was one that said that that is a weakness or a threat, because that small group is very vocal, and we know that the statistics aren't necessarily what we have coming from our chief of police.
Agreed. So yes, and I was looking at broader, not the city of Coos Bay specifically, but more the county. And if there's opportunities to put it in documents so that we can address it, I'm going to always encourage us to do that. So I appreciate your point, Councillor Kilmer. I'm really excited that we had the commission, the Planning Commission this evening. Any final comments from the commission? No? Okay. Thank you so much for all of your work, and we're very appreciative. We look forward to you collaborating more, I think, with Councillor Stevens and some others. Clearly, this is a passionate council, so lots of feedback so far, and I imagine you'll get more going forward. So thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Beth.
Thank you all.
Thanks all.
That is the last item on the agenda this evening, so I will quickly ask for any council comments. Okay, seeing that there, Mayor Benetti, council comment?
No, I just was getting ready to go. Thank you, Lucinda, for filling in, and it was great to have the Planning Commission work with us. There.
Great, seeing that there are no council comments, I will adjourn this meeting. Thank you.
Hey, everyone.